With the big news internationally, President Trump, as is his custom, sent out a couple of tweets about, let me see, at 8:58 a.m. And he says, I informed John Bolton last night that his services are no longer needed at the White House. I disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration, and therefore I asked John for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. I thank John very much for his service. I will be naming a new national security advisor next week. I'll start with you, Ambassador. Did that come as a surprise to you? Because I know the White House has proven a revolving door.
Let me first of all greet my colleagues. I've been missing them. I've been away, and also welcome you to the show. I don't know who should welcome who, but you are a good, fresh mind with us this morning. I am not surprised, Olive, because I think there is one credit that you should give President Trump, that he is up to technology. He uses his tweet perhaps too much. I don't know whether he has enough sleep. And he governs through tweet. I mean, if you want to read his mind, just read his tweet. And so I think that's a platform he uses. But I think getting on a serious matter of firing of Bolton, it was coming. It was coming because of 4 areas that seems to be troubling Trump from his national security advisor. Bolton has had his own mind, and Trump does not accept that kind of mindset. The second one, there are some specific areas that disagreed. Bolton has always taken a more hawkish position on Russia against Trump's position. He has taken a more tough stance on Iran, on China, and even at home on matters, for instance, migration and the rest. And so there are some areas that were potentially very difficult for him to manage him. But even his management with his own colleagues, I mean, it was obvious that he has not been in talking terms with Mike Pompeo for some time. They don't even talk. And yet the 2 positions really is what informs the American foreign policy. The national security advisor on security issues and foreign policy by Pompeo. And so it was coming. But the matter of firing is really strange. I mean, I would hate to work for somebody that you get a letter of appointment, but you are fired through the phone or through the media. That's what we used to do in Kenya sometimes. Yes, our members of parliament used to tune in to 1 o'clock news to just find out if their name are still on the payroll. Yeah, that's true. That is not strange.
All right. Hassan, did it come as a surprise to you? I mean, I see where the ambassador is coming from. They have disagreed fundamentally on a number of issues because Trump has been extending an olive branch, so to speak, to a lot of persons who have traditionally been viewed as not being in consonance with the U.S. and its policy, foreign policy. So I'm guessing it wasn't a surprise to you either?
Actually, certainly not. You know, Donald Trump introduced, I think, a new concept in governance called tweetocracy to replace democracy. And he seems to be doing pretty well with it. Now, the appointment of John Bolton, first of all, was an anomaly. Trump himself is a very flawed president. And to have 2 extremely flawed people leading national security, it's extremely dangerous. Now, it's true that the Trump White House has been a revolving door. I think John Bolton is the 3rd national security advisor in 3 years. The first one was extremely flawed, General Flynn, who turned out to be, you know, a big fraud. Then McMaster, then Bolton, and then there's another one who's coming, actually, who's right now in the acting capacity, who is also extremely flawed if you look at his associations with nationalist groups and Islamophobic groups in the last 10 or so years. So I think Trump still has issues, but I think fundamentally, as Ambassador did mention, Trump does not like people who go against his word. Now, what was coming from the White House, it became apparent that John Bolton was calling for much stronger, tougher action against North Korea. He was against any form of rapprochement with Iran, because I think there have been talks, Trump has been contemplating talking to Hassan Rouhani, president of Iran, the recent collapse of the potential talks between the White House and the Taliban. Apparently, you know, he was also extremely against it. Now, we know that the U.S. has been moving in the direction of trying to strike a deal. Now, Trump prides himself as a deal maker of the century. He even called himself last month he's the chosen one, apparently. And as a deal maker, he wants to see his deals go through. And so if you come out and start challenging that, and someone like, such as John Bolton, he has been known to be extremely hawkish. A lot of us campaigned against his nomination, first of all, as way back during the Bush administration, to be the U.S. ambassador of the United Nations because of his hawkish stand. He was instrumental in making sure the Kyoto Protocol did not go through, you know, and so many other things. So there is no laugh lost. But because of the direction of where he's been going, and he's not just hawkish internally, you know, he also goes out there on TV, on Fox News, to say things that are actually contrary to what the White House, for instance, you know, is planning to do. So to us, it did not come as a surprise. I expected it to come much earlier. But as you know, the Trump party is a little bit chaotic, actually. And with him, he acts on whim, and he didn't even vet him, you know, properly. He has fired way too many people, in part because they didn't speak his language. But of course, they're not expected to speak his language. So we expect a lot more chaos in the next 1 year before the next election.
All right. Dr. Nzao, both gentlemen have referred to John Bolton as hawkish. For those of us who are not conversant with the term, what does it mean?
Yeah, it is about the idiosyncratic inclination or ideological inclination of someone, but it's associated with, like they say, like you would say, a Republican government is hawkish. So it's hawkish in terms of how it approaches. It's more bold, it's more outgoing, it's more preemptive, and so on. So the opposite of that would be dovish. So you're more, you know, diplomatic. You're cautious, and so on. So they say people like Richard Nixon is the only one who went to. They say Nixon went to China because he was that time, those years, that he was a Republican. So and Trump says, I go to places where no one else would go. You know, I would talk to the North Korean leaders and so on. So I've gone places where no one else would do. So that's you'd say that's hawkish, and so on. So, but basically, how to analyze the whole thing is that you know, regime or administration is just a style of governance. Governments will always be there. There's the chief executive. They have their own ideological, their own style of doing things. Regime is the style of rulership. So, you know, you have to be in the Trump administration, you have to do it how he wants it done. His way or the highway. His way. So he was going to have his way because citizens have ceded their rights and all that, you know, to have someone to represent them. And so, you know, it's like the Hobbesian sense that you give your you delegate your will, you give up your common will to someone, and therefore you can create a monster, you know, Leviathan, like he used to say. But of course there are rules around it. So the chief executive in the context of the United States has got a lot of people who come in as appointees, and then they are vetted by the two houses, by Parliament, you know, by Congress. And then they have to play by the rules of the chief executive and his style. So, you know, that's Trump for you and his administration. But we have to respect that because he represents the people of the United States.
All right.
Yeah.
Ahmed, you know, they've talked about, I think it was Dr. Hassan, who's talked about how he was recruited. You know, we've heard about Trump recruiting pundits straight off of Fox News because they sang his praises. And there was a claim that he expects the media to carry out his vetting, or rather to do the vetting for his administration. Do you think that's part of the reason why we see this constant revolving door? Should Bolton have adapted to Trump's style of leadership?
First of all, I'd like to tell my learned colleague next to me that I am a hawk, And
Since
it's important to be a
Since
hawk
when?
because, you know, a hawk is a much more attractive bird than a dove. But it's really good to look at this from a perspective of African political economy, and to say what impact does this have on us, rather than to analyze what's happening inside the American administration, which is really not much of our concern. So Mr. Bolton was a right-wing neoconservative, someone who believed in a kind of Malthusian worldview, you know, the bottom of the barrel, the strongest survive, and he really didn't have much time for Africa. He didn't think that there was much use for the continent except for military purposes, and he opposed very many things in the Security Council. You remember he was an ambassador to the UN. So he certainly ate doves. He was a big hawk, and nobody liked him much. And at the end of the day, he met with an eagle. You know, the symbol of the American Republic is an eagle.
Yes.
And Trump is the eagle. So the hawk got eaten. And it was a good thing that this happened. And the reason it happened is because he was too big for his breeches, and he was not elected. On the issue of how it's going to affect Kenya, I'm not sure that our relationship with the United States right now is that amazing. Of course, Mr. Trump has called us shitholes. He really doesn't care for us, and we probably don't care much for him. So I think that in the long run, we are going to see someone replace Mr. Bolton, who is a hawk, but he's not going to be a very big hawk. He could be a smaller hawk.
Okay, so you said we need to look at how this impacts Africa.
Yeah.
So is it good or bad for Africa? And Professor,
We have a great specialist for that right next to me here.
He's passed the baton to you.
I think that this is the right thing to happen. First of all, he should never have been appointed in any shape, in any senior position in the United States. I serve on the national security. I met Bolton 3 times, and I've had a very senior Republican members of the national security said this fellow should never be any close to the most powerful button in the world. He's a madman. He's unreasonable. He's an ultra extremist in his view. Not only remembering that we have a very turbulent world, turbulent place, and a very dangerous in terms of armament and everything. And then we have reached a point which I talked about several times, of what's called tri-power polar, where China is coming up very aggressively, Russia is arming itself to the teeth, and America is still the most powerful country in the world, and has is capable of really destroying this world the way we know it. And so if to have that kind of person who is pushing to attack North Korea, who want to annihilate Iran instead of talking, this is not the kind of person that you want closer to that power. And therefore, of all the things Trump has done, this is the only thing that I can say he's done it right. Get him out of there and move him so far out of anywhere where he has any influence.
Okay, but you know that, okay, so we all seem to be, or rather you all seem to be supporting this decision by Trump for once. One of his decisions has received a resounding endorsement. But, I mean, there's some of the things you've mentioned that would make me imagine that the two would get on like a house on fire. Things like he should be nowhere near the nuclear or nowhere near is it a button? Is it usually a button that you press to launch the nuclear arsenal? And the fact that so he seems to be a tough talking kind of guy, hawkish, you've said, yeah. So I would imagine that him and Trump would get on really well.
Well, that is the assumption. You know, however, I think with regard to objectives, they're different. Trump wants to be seen to succeed. And Bolton's strategy gets them nowhere. And so a lot of times you're going to see Trump raise the pressure on a country or on a party, but when it's not working, he's actually willing to try and strike a deal, or at least appear to be moving in that direction. John Bolton, on the other hand, is so uncompromising. It doesn't matter what it is.
Do you think perhaps Bolton was sabotaging some of his efforts, like with North Korea?
We don't think, we know. He was, that's part of the reason he was actually, he was ousted, because he was so fiercely, opposed to any kind of rapprochement with these countries. Now, of course, not all Americans agree with the Trump's foreign policy decisions, but I think he seems to actually believe that he can strike deals with some of these countries, including the ones that hate, America the most, or Americans hate the most. And anyone who does not support that, remember the election is coming up. He wants to achieve some success, or at least to be seen to do that. And John Bolton is not someone who's going to give you that. He has never done that, in his entire life. So it was impossible to actually see him lasting in the White House, beyond this year.
Okay, Ambassador Mwensha, but don't you need somebody like that in your corner? Because Trump is perhaps internationally widely viewed as a novice, or, just, I guess, let's stick with novice, to be politically, or rather just to be politically correct and fair, when it comes to diplomacy. Didn't he need, what do I put it, a hardliner in his corner?
Well, you interpreted our common agreement as meaning that we really support
the decision.
What Trump is doing. Far from it. Actually, what we are saying, that Trump himself is a very difficult person to work with. He has his own mind. He has his own set objective for what he wants to achieve. He knows exactly what he's going for. And for that matter, anyone who works in an advisory position is a national security advisor. It is not necessary that you tell your boss what he wants to hear or she wants to hear. It is to tell the boss what the state of the reality is. And then the boss can take a choice. But then when you do that, you have to do it with some decorum. He never respected. You had him, Hassan say he would go to Fox News and talk his own mind.
Yeah.
I mean, national security advisors don't come out to outshine the boss. You work under the boss. But you asked a question that I think is important to go back to, when you said, what does this mean to Africa? Ironically, Trump administration has maintained the African position that he inherited from Obama, and which also Obama inherited from Bush, and which Bush also inherited from Clinton. Africa has always had a special position. In fact, even under Trump, he has enhanced some of those aspects. Particularly, he has now, of course, what he has done is destroyed the US aid. He's made the department under, the Department of State. But he has increased funding, and he is keen to see investment come to Africa. Of course, he's not doing it because he loves Africa, because he knows he comes from the American business, interest, and he knows America is going to lose out if they lose their eyes on Africa, because they need the raw materials, they need the market, and so he has maintained his stance on Africa.
Okay. Okay, yes.
I just wanted to interject a little and say that I'll disagree with my colleague.
Of course.
Here.
Of course.
Yeah, he was too harsh on President Trump because you have to respect the choice of the American people because that is the way of democracy. That is Donald Trump. His style, his background is from the business world, corporate world. Where you can hire and fire and so on. I mean, he has that mentality, but he's the president of the United States, and Kenya enjoys very warm relations with the United States because he's an important strategic partner for Kenya and vice versa. And therefore, we cannot just take those words literally. That means that we enjoy the warmest relations with the United States, is a friend of Kenya and vice versa. And therefore, you know, someone out there who wouldn't understand the language of some of these harsh, hawkish analysts might think that our relations are not in the good, you know. So that's, I wanted just to clear
Ahmed,
that.
who are you eating?
I have great respect for the governor of Makueni.
Yes.
Kibwana,
Yes.
who's doing a lot of development work in Makueni, which interests me more than the United States. I'm sure we're going to segue now into other issues.
Yeah, we're going to move closer home, yes.
My learned friend here is a very good friend of mine, by the way, can disagree with me all he wants, because he's just as conservative as many of the people that we're talking about.
But before we move, from the West, yes.
Yes.
What I want to say is you have to understand Trump,
Yeah.
okay, before you understand how he acts. Trump is like a bully in the backyard, you know, that intimidate you first and then later you become friends. That's what he has used in his business tactic all through. He was about to annihilate North Korea. Then he's the first president to step in North Korea. You cannot understand it. I mean, he's ready to talk directly with everyone after he goes in and say, go ahead and, you know, do this. Intimidate. This is his way. Now, when you have an extreme hawkish, you know, like Bolton in the middle, he takes that to the next level, and compromising, and without understanding the intricate, complex world that we are in. And so that's not the U.S. foreign policy. Richard Nixon was really a hawkish, but when his foreign policy expert take on issues, he respect that, and therefore is contained and respecting the American. There is an American power system that has existed for a long time and is respected by every president.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing we're talking about.
So he's not as clueless, perhaps, when it comes to diplomacy as some may like us to believe.
You know, Olive, I didn't welcome you to the show. First, welcome. I mean,
Yes.
I'm glad that this issue of Trump has been raised, because we've talked about it before. I think that this is indicative of a whole group of people in the world of international politics today who have moved to the extreme right, to extreme populism. We have our own extreme right populism people in Africa, and we ought to challenge that kind of thinking. We ought to challenge that kind of politics, because it's not good for the common people, and politics is about the common people. And people like Donald Trump, who did not won the electoral college of the votes in the United States, but Hillary Clinton had the majority of the people elect her. And we're waiting for the next election. I've said on live TV that Trump's going to lose the coming election, and he's going to lose it very bad.
That's what people thought the last time.
Yes, I predicted he was going to win the last time.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But he's going to lose this time very much, because he rode on Obama's economy, and he's not made much of an impact on that economy, or not made it bigger. And Americans vote with their pocketbook mostly.
And Kanenja and I go to vote.
And Kanenja, they'll make the deciding.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Now, before I move away from the West, I think it was, Hassan, did you make reference to the tweetocracy? And I think we've raised the Taliban issue. So he tweeted, unbeknown to most people, the major Taliban leaders and separately the president of were going to secretly meet with me at Camp David on Sunday. They were coming to the United States tonight. Unfortunately, in order to build false leverage, they admitted to an attack in Kabul that killed one of our great soldiers and 11 other people. I immediately cancelled the meeting and called off peace negotiations. That, I mean, we haven't traditionally seen that sort of openness. You know, where he comes onto Twitter and he divulges the details of conversations and negotiations that have been happening behind the scenes. Usually they come out when a deal has been reached. Is it a good shift? Is this transparency good when it comes to foreign diplomacy? Or do the people he engages with feel like they can't trust him with sensitive information? I'll start with the professor.
I think all of you said it right. diplomacy is a very complex thing, but it's the higher part of a whole discussion around the world. War is the last thing when everything fails. So diplomacy is the supreme. Diplomacy needs quiet behind the door, behind the screen. Kissinger stepping into China was not known until everything was set, ready to go. And therefore, you cannot treat diplomacy like that. You cannot tweet. You cannot speak out about the complex, many years of, of this complex issue that has gone on for years. And so he just cut off. He just cut off what perhaps some things that positive things may have happened, but he cut them off by Twitter.
Okay.